Okay, well, let's start with explaining why we're recording this video. So, we have a program called Integral Leadership that Alex, you've brought into the organization. And we all see integral leadership as a key part of our leadership development approach. So, what we want to do is discover a little bit more about what integral leadership is and why we've decided that it's important and we give it a lot of time, focus, and energy. So, my first question for you, Alex, is what is the Integral Leadership Program? What's involved?
So the program is a combination of really important threads that combine. It's a structured agenda set of workshops for staff that bring people through. I think it's about 5 key areas in relation to integral theory, integral leadership, so that stuff over actually a full 5-day period, not all in 5 days continuous, that really prepare people with the theoretical knowledge that they need to have to work with the skills. But it does have some practical exercises along the way. But I think what's really important in underpinning that or supporting that development is the ongoing coaching that's provided. And the coaching is structured within the integral theory model. Integral theory and also what's called meta-NLP or Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So that would center it mostly around developing much more honed up and precise communication skills, which fit within the integral theory as well. So yeah, it's the workshops, the coaching, and then the homework that individuals do, both between the coaching sessions and between the actual workshop sessions. And then it's really down to bringing that back into the workplace and applying it. That's where, what's the expression, the rubber hits the road.
That's right. Yep. And that can be a challenging bit for employees as well. We might chat about that in a moment, a bit further about how people can actually make that happen. I'm curious about how you came to choose integral leadership itself. So what was it that attracted you to integral leadership? And what made you bring it into organization?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because it's being a bit of a personal journey for me in the context of my leading this organization. And I tend to be naturally cautious. So I was working with the coaching room who provide these courses for a few years before I made the decision to invite them in, to invite a broader range of service to the organization. I had been to more established, what I call a more conservative coach executive coaching institutes, which were helpful to a certain degree to support management skills. But I did find it wasn't really giving me any stretch, wasn't really giving me anything new. And so I did a bit of research on the websites and found the coaching room. And I was really excited about the approach they took to tapping into human potential, rather than kind of implanting knowledge and skills on a person. And so I started executive coaching with them, and then they invited me into some NLP courses, which were really around developing coaching skills for myself, in my case, as a manager. And then the coaching room, launched a new program called Integral Theory, and it was all around facilitation. But I was just really blown over by the simplicity and the depth same time of that integral theory model and how it could be applied to so many all aspects of lives. And so it was after that they launched the Corporate Integral Leadership Program. And around the time that we were probably getting a bit dissatisfied with another leadership group that were providing programs, that I made a bit of a step decision actually to bring them in. And start with the executive first, and then roll it out to other staff throughout the organization.
That's excellent. There's a few things I'm really pleased to hear within that answer, because I entirely agree. It sounds to me like what you're saying is personal development and professional development are intertwined, which I heartily agree with, that you can't have professional development, true deep professional development, without some the personal side of it coming in. And also that, I'm taking something else out of this, but you sound like a lifelong learner as well. So continually searching and learning, which again, I'm wholeheartedly a fan of. So this, I'm also loving the idea that there's multiple levels that you can access this. You mentioned you can do things kind of at simple levels or deep levels. So it sounds like there'll be something for everyone, no matter what, how deep they want to get into it.
Absolutely. The coming back to your point about the link between personal and professional lives, I think there are other models that address that, but there's something much more powerful about integral theory in the way that it frames human reality and really breaks down the social construct barriers between our personal life, our professional life, and other sorts of compartmentalized constructs that we put in place. And that's actually probably one of the most challenging things to deal with, because it really goes against some of Shival upbringing and the way in which workplaces characterize, when you're supposed to be having fun, when you're supposed to be serious. We can actually drop those sort of constructs and just engage with life generally. And that's only going to be more effective for the performance and culture of an organization in any case.
Yeah, we talk a lot about bringing your whole self to work, and I think that that's part of things too. If we do completely compartmentalize, then we're not really bringing our whole selves to work.
Absolutely. And I mentioned the fact that it's quite challenging because we don't always see how we're bringing those compartmentalized pieces. So even just the way we talk about our personal life while we're at work, or talk about at work life while we're outside work, it sometimes needs a coach to point to it for you. For me, for example, to point out what I'm doing, and then that helps to really clarify that and open up ways of speaking about those subjects in different ways.
Excellent. You mentioned Ken Wilber before. I know while I still have lots to learn about integral leadership, I know one of the key pieces of his work is a 4-quadrant model. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. So he's quite an amazing philosopher. You might describe him as has written a huge number of books. And he's done PhDs when he was younger. He took time out for 2 to 3 years, I think, where he just locked himself in a room and alone and read and read and read so many different theories about reality from all different perspectives of scientific journals and philosophers. And he distilled everything into what he could see as a common way of dividing up or allocating 4 quadrants of perspective on human reality. So that applies to anything that we're doing, but it's an understanding that it's human reality. So it's reality that we, as humans, share with each other. And the first simple distinction is between internal and external. So the external being those things that we can see, touch, measure, etc. And the internal being that the thoughts and the beliefs and attitudes, none of which another person can see. We can communicate them in language, and people can assume them by watching behaviors, but they can't be seen therein. And then cutting across that is another key distinction between the individual and the collective. So the I and the we, if we're talking about internal. So my individual beliefs, thoughts, feelings, action are not actions. And then from a cultural perspective, the cultural assumptions, the way in which people connect with each other, all the sorts of things that we can't actually see, we can only assume about collective. So it might be a country culture, or a subculture, or a work culture. But then on the external side, the individual is the individual actions and behaviors, facts that we might be able to individually identify, while in the collective external, we're really looking at systems and observable systems and networks in an organization that might either do the policies and frameworks that we could actually read about the organization from a collective perspective.
This applies to more than just the workplace, doesn't it? This 4-quadrant model.
It certainly does. So one of the key things about the 4 quadrants, and I'm mindful that trying to present it in just a few minutes in the way that I have, it would be quite difficult because they'd read a whole book on it. But one of the important things to recognize is that each person is most likely to have a native position in one of those quadrants. So to give an example, that might be a person who mostly speaks from the I perspective, from their own individual, internal perspective. They can see actions and they can see systems, and they can understand that culture is there. It's not that they can't see that, but they mostly come from that perspective. That's their native quadrant, the I. Another person might be a native we or cultural quadrant perspective. The other person might be very much caught up in all the systems, or will always start the first sentence talking about the systems involved. And then, of course, you've got somebody who might just want to get on with things and always be talking about actions and behaviors that need to occur. And so when we understand that, first of all, it helps us work out where we are where others are, which enables a greater understanding as to how to communicate with people in other quadrants. And on that point, even if we're writing corporate communications or designing a project, you'd be able to take into account all of the full perspectives every time we write, means that we'll get our message through more effectively to a much broader range of people within our organization or within our family, in our relationships, and all of these reinforce each other. If we start in our personal life, that will have an impact on making changes in our work life and vice versa.
Yeah, it sounds like and I can see why the word integral is in there now, because we're integrating all of the different quadrants or perspectives. It sounds like a great way to approach potentially conflict resolution as well. If people are coming from different quadrants, perhaps that could be causing some conflicts or miscommunications. So it sounds like a tool that could support collaboration and working together too.
Absolutely. And one of the ways in which it can do that is by having deeper knowledge of ourselves and others. It helps to depersonalize some of those conflicts, to see what might be triggering conflicts, and then being able to step back and take that into perspective. See conflict as something that is positive and able to generate new ideas.
Yeah.
Rather than a negative thing that has to be resolved.
Yeah, it sounds like a great way to identify blind spots. We can't all see every perspective, or maybe we can if we're fully integral. But we can see each other as complementary if they're within a different quadrant or natively within a different quadrant than us.
Yeah, so I think most people most definitely benefit from taking into account other people's perspectives so that we can build that integral picture of things. Like that, most of us do have blind spots, and so by developing this shared understanding and a shared language, that enables that way of being able to share those different perspectives and build something that's much bigger and better in terms of our view of a problem or an initiative or an opportunity.
So it sounds like there's lots to learn, and particularly for those who are going to undertake the Integral Leadership Program. Do you have any advice for them if they're about to enter into the workshops or the coaching?
I guess one of my strongest pieces of advice would be to keep it up in mind. To notice, but put to the side any reactions, be it negative or positive, to what you might be hearing. And to recognize that having a sense of confusion can actually be a positive sign, of beginning to engage with something new and learning. If you're not confused, you're not learning.
I wholeheartedly agree. I spent a lot of time confused, and I learned a lot. So, integral leadership. If someone's learning integral leadership, does that mean, because it's integral and holistic, they don't have to learn anything else? So can we put all other training aside for them?
No. There's still the need for technical training and other sorts of training that might be quite specific. Given the point that I was making, that Ken Wilber had read so many different material from so many different disciplines about every discipline there is, and created this theory as an integral model to capture all of reality, all of human reality, it would most definitely embrace all other important pieces of learning. But what might be helpful for anyone mapping out their training for the year is to locate it into the different quadrants. What are the training is more about learning skills to act? What is more about getting a better understanding of systems? What is more about being able to tap in and work with the culture and connections more effectively? And then what is more about self-development? So it really does, well, the phrase that Ken Wilber used is transcend and include. So integral theory transcends and includes all other things.
That's got me thinking. I'm curious whether people tend to navigate towards training that's in an area that they're natively comfortable with. And if so, it would be interesting to see that. And then people can start challenging themselves to build skills in training that might be from the other quadrants.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There would be some people that would gravitate to training that's in the comfort zone of theirs, their native quadrant. There might also be cases where, and if you think of the context where a manager is giving feedback to the staff member and saying, look, you're really strong here, but you're not so strong there. Why don't you do some training in this area? But not being expressed in the quadrant perspective at the time. Sometimes what's being pointed to is they're being pushed into training in a quadrant that they're just not comfortable with, or I have a blind spot with. And if that's not understood, maybe some of the learning opportunities can be lost. So it can be helpful to get an understanding it. And is this in my comfort zone quadrant, or a more difficult quadrant, and I need to understand how all the bits fit together?
Yeah, and to prepare yourself potentially for extra confusion if it's not in your native quadrant and be okay with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now you mentioned that the executive have done integral leadership. I'm curious as to you how it kind of manifests in the workplace for you as an executive group.
Sure. So I'd probably say, they've done their 5-day course. We have done the 5-day course, and we haven't quite done integral leadership. Things that you just keep doing and keep developing. It's helped us in a number of ways. I think we communicate well. I know that we communicate more openly and transparently with each other than previously. And we've got tools to do that with, more objective, and able to work with those areas of conflict in that creative way that I was speaking about. We regularly use a 4-quadrant analysis of any important initiative that we're developing at the moment. So if it's developing a new project or a new program that we're planning to launch to the market, or how we might be engaging with the university, we'll either have somebody work on a full quadrant analysis first, or work on it together as a team, so that we can really make sure that we're getting a holistic or integral perspective, not that particular issue that we might be looking at. And we're now introducing a full quadrant approach to updating job descriptions, so that we're looking at behaviors, attitudes, skills, and knowledge. And we also use it to manage meetings more effectively by having a really clear quadrant perspective on what the purpose of a meeting is for. Is it about partnering? Is it about dealing with something that's already described? Is it about processing? Or is it about supporting someone through change on the cultural perspective? It's often when that's not clear that a meeting can go on for a much longer than needed and not have the outcomes, whatever needed, or people not on the outcomes. So that's been a big change for us.
Excellent. I imagine as more people go through the integral leadership program, we'll find more ways to apply in the workplace. You proposed one just a few minutes ago when talking about looking at people's development. Where are they focusing their training? Do they need to look at it from a quadrant perspective? So the more people who become familiar with integral theory through the integral leadership program, the more we'll find ways to apply it in the workplace.
Absolutely. It's one of those bottom-up, top-down things. So we have a perspective as the chief executive. But I'm really keen to see as more staff become versant with the theory, and they have different experiences in the workplaces than we do. Be able to see things that we don't see, to be able to bring to our attention, and we can have some really creative ideas coming through.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex. I found this very enlightening, and I'm looking forward to participating in integral leadership myself. Much appreciated.